everyone, and welcome to the Tempo Strategy Legends of Runeterra Meta Snapshot. Monuments of Power has recently entered the format, bringing with it 40 new cards and a new mechanic, Landmarks. Despite these additions, the format has remained largely unchanged, with many of the top decks from the last format holding their position on the tier list. Though some of the new cards have been able to make their way into top decks, there have been a few strategies that have been trying to find a home in this new format. In this video, we will be covering the Tier 1 and 2 decks of the format. If you want to see the full Legends of Runeterra Meta Snapshot, head on over to the Tempo Storm website, which will be linked in the description below. While you're at it, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you can stay up to date with more Tempo strategy content. Starting things off in Tier 1, we have Zed Lee Sin. Lee Sin strategies have been rising through the ranks through the past few snapshots, and this time around it sits as king of the format. In past weeks, Lee was being held back by its poor matchup against Pirate Aggro. Post Monuments of Power, however, things have changed a bit. The addition of Nopify has given the Lee Sin strategy a way to combat cards such as Nox and Fervor or Powder Keg Make It Rains. This has swung the matchup so much that it has gone from being one of Lee Sin's most dreaded matchups to one where it has a legitimate game plan. Most commonly, Lee Sin is paired with Zed, though there are some similar builds that will look to play Diana or abandon the second champion completely. Lee Sin is undeniably one of the most powerful decks in today's format and fulfills the meta's role of the combo deck in Ezreal's absence. Right behind Combo Lee, we have Pirate Aggro. This aggressive Noxus Bilgewater list has been a top contender in the format for a bit now. It possesses a brutal early curve and tops it off with high amounts of raw burn damage. This strategy became a popular build during the rise of Noxus Bilgewater and held its position due to it having solid matchups against both Lee Sin combo and Swain Twisted Fate, the other most popular build of Bilgewater Noxus. There are truly no decks in the format that will want to fight Pirate Aggro, as it simply is able to go under most decks, but still has tools to play a relatively long game for a beatdown deck. Though you can argue Pirate Aggro has no bad matchups, it does not have any overwhelmingly positive matchups either. It is simply a consistent deck that can reliably execute its game plan against most opponents. The older cousin of Pirates, Swain TF, is a burn-based control deck that has access to solid ways to flood the board, decent card advantage, and a game-ending lock of Swain alongside the Leviathan. The strategy has some of the strongest removal options out of any strategy in Runeterra. Between Ravenous Flock, Make It Rain, Red Card, and Powder Kegs, the deck will find ways to keep most boards under control. Swain TF has been a Tier 1 force in the metagame for 5 meta snapshots in a row now, and it shows very little interest in letting go of its position despite getting touched up in recent balance patches. Discard Aggro is a new addition to Tier 1, though this is not the first time it has found itself in Tier 1. At the start of Call of the Mountain, Discard Aggro was able to shortly spike to Tier 1, but quickly dropped back down the ranks in future weeks. It could be that will be a pattern for Discard Aggro in the future. It is common for young metagames to be heavily punished by lean aggro decks, and no deck fits that description better than Discard Aggro. The build can produce overwhelming board states as soon as turn 3, has incredible card draw tools, and heavy amounts of burn damage. Poorly optimized decks simply cannot keep up with Discard Aggro's raw velocity. Given that the start of this format has been filled with Lee strategies that struggle against Discard Aggro, as well as a handful of poorly optimized decks, Discard Aggro has once again found a format it can thrive in. We will have to wait and see where Discard Aggro goes from here. Since the release of Call of the Mountain, Trundle Ramp strategies have been an integral part of the metagame. Between War Mothers, Aurelion Sol, and Ledros Freljord Ramp has a few different directions to go, and they are all quite powerful. These decks are able to slow the game down with Avalanche, establish a wall with Trundle, and accelerate their mana, allowing them to quickly play their Haymaker cards. Considering Trundle Ramp has so many viable ways to be played, it is likely to remain a constant force in the metagame for some time to come. Rising out of Tier 3 up to Tier 2, Sea Monsters is an archetype that has been slightly revitalized with this new set release. The addition of its new landmark, the Slaughter Docks, has given the archetype a bit of help, making it slightly more consistent. What is so important about the Slaughter Docks is that it helps smooth out your worst hands. If the Sea Monster player has a hand that cannot quickly get deep, the Slaughter Docks will incrementally get you deeper over time. That said, Sea Monsters has a very bad matchup against Lee Sin. So long as Lee remains a dominant force in the format, Sea Monsters can only rise so far. The only truly new archetype to make waves in the format, Soraka Kench, finds itself sitting at the bottom of Tier 2. Somewhere between a board-based mid-range deck and a grindy control deck, this strategy aims to stall the board out with solid curve units that come into play damaged, so that it may heal them back up later with Star Spring. Once it can establish a foothold on the board, it can start pulling ahead with Tahm Kench. Every turn, Tahm Kench will generate an acquired taste, which will threaten to completely gimp enemy board progression if he is not answered quickly. Most often, Soraka Kench will find a win with Star Spring, but it does have access to reasonable curves and can just play a mid-range game plan. Though dragons have realistically had little impact on the format in a competitive sense, it has been a popular choice on ladder recently simply because it is new, and who can resist dragons? Unfortunately, however, Shyvana and her dragon support is overall relatively weak, landing it in tier 4 this meta snapshot. Hopefully one day dragons will soar to the top of the tier list, but the archetype will first need a push in the right direction. Monuments of Power has brought a handful of cards that have impacted the metagame, but overall the metagame has not changed all too drastically. Lee Sin, Noxus Bilgewater, and Trundle Ramp have established themselves as pillars of the format, creating an environment that is more hostile to tier 3 decks than in past formats. These weaker decks often do not have the tools to reasonably handle many of the top decks in the format, which range to lethal one-turn combos, fast burn decks, and over-the-top endgame win conditions. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with more tempo strategy content. Thanks for watching!